Good afternoon. My name is Folau. I'm the CEO of Gitlinks. And Gitlinks is an enterprise SaaS solution that helps companies monitor their use of open source. So can we go back? Start with the end in mind. Good? All right. So the rate at which we're using open source today is increasing exponentially. I mean, who would have thought? Anybody can just go on the web, grab a bunch of code now, and paste it together, and now voila, we got a new website, or maybe another application. In fact, 80% of the code that goes into our applications today is open source. So this is forcing us to now think of cybersecurity and our intellectual property in a different way. There are thousands of security vulnerabilities reported every year, and there's hundreds of open source licenses that companies now have to comply with. On the cyber front, open source is a new attack surface that's growing. If you're not vigilant about the open source vulnerabilities that may be embedded inside your application, your company might lose big, as was the example with the recent hack at Equifax. Open source is becoming easier and easier to exploit these days. So in order to leverage and benefit from using open source technologies, you really have to understand how you're going to mitigate all the risks associated with it. You have to understand fully all the open source components that might be floating around in your organization. You also have to meticulously screen licenses for open source before you even start using it. You also have to monitor continuously all the thousands of security vulnerabilities that are out there that may affect you. Once you have comfort that you're doing all that correctly, you can then allow your development teams to really be creative and create. So we automate that comfort for companies using open source. We built an enterprise SaaS solution that will seek out all the open source being used across an organization so that companies can move away from having to force their developers to log all their open source on Excel spreadsheets. We do that by integrating into a company's continuous integration tool, which they're using to build and test their code. No longer do you need a team of people to screen and approve every single open source component as safe to use within an organization. We can do that in seconds. And we can comply with the regulations and the guidelines that you want to enforce within your organization. And we can do that because we are actively tracking and adding in new open source vulnerabilities, licenses, and version updates to our systems daily. Now, we focus on two things to be unique within the competitive landscape here. First of which is security. We're seeking to build the most comprehensive security vulnerability database for open source. And we're doing that by leveraging both crowdsourcing and customer-led discoveries. We can then alert all of our Gitlinks clients to security vulnerabilities before they're listed on publicly available databases. We also, secondly, focus on building a true enterprise solution that helps management see an overview of how open source is used at the organization, as well as control the guidelines under which open source is used in an organization. Now, this is a highly under-penetrated market, with less than 10% of Fortune 500 companies currently using a solution to address open source risk. It's currently a $25 billion market and is growing at 25% annually. So I spent about a decade in the open source, or in the information security space in the US Army. My co-founder managed enterprise software development at Chevron. We both understand this space, and we understand how to take user experience and user-inspired feedback and build it into enterprise solutions. Again, we're Gitlinks. We want companies to use more open source, so we make open source safe to use. Thanks.
So thank you for your presentation. It's a great solution, but like most great solutions, you're not the only one that's doing it. And I think that you're pretty transparent in showing some of your competitors. So one of your differentiation you talk about is vulnerability crowdsourcing. what is the incentive of an enterprise to share that back with you? It's question number one. And question number two, how big of a base do you already have for that to be a force that's valuable to other customers that's about to sign on?
Right. So this has been actually a feature that companies have asked us to put in, is ability to put custom input of things that they wanted to be alerted to. So we're asking companies now, all right, so are you willing to share that information with other clients of Gitlinks as well? This is essentially building in this network where everybody can benefit from each other by being part of the Gitlinks umbrella. So currently, the current status of our clients. So
how many people are actually contributing back to vulnerabilities?
So as far as from the enterprise led part of our platform, it's growing right now because we're still onboarding new clients at the moment.
So two comments. One is, yeah, I think you came to the right conference because Jesse's the guy who's going to buy your company when you're successful. Jesse's with Red Hat, just for the audience. The other comment is liability issues for you guys. So now you're disclosing to your audience vulnerabilities that are crowdsourced to you. How do you know they actually are vulnerabilities and this isn't some nameless company in Redmond, Washington trying to embarrass a competitor, for example?
Right. I definitely understand that. So obviously we have to vet and approve all open source vulnerabilities that are reported to us. So we're building it into the platform where we essentially have to verify that it is in fact a vulnerability. It also is in fact something that's not duplicated already on a publicly listed database like the National Vulnerability Database. But yes, those are things that we have to take into consideration.
In terms of budgets available to do this within enterprise, I would suspect that most enterprises have looked at or bought Black Duck in the past since they've been around quite a long time and have kind of been the gold standard for open source scanning for quite a while. What's the pitch to the customer about why we're worth more, or in addition to, or in place of those guys, just outside of maybe some marginal modules around vulnerability? How do you get them to say, oh, we're going to replace that tool with yours, given their history and the fact that you're relatively new to the market and may not have as long a experience curve in looking at all different types of licenses and vulnerabilities and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that Black Duck knows licenses. I mean, they're the ones that really made that apparent in the market. They were the first to come to market, really. So licenses, they got down. Security vulnerabilities, I say, they still have some work to do. It's something that they added onto their platform just a couple years ago, which is great, but it also it's not enhanced in any other way other than referencing a publicly listed database. The other portions where we feel like we can step it up is really being a full enterprise solution here. So when I say that, I mean not speaking bad of any of my competitors, but they all started in as auditing services, and I believe that's where they still are. I believe there's still more to be built on a full enterprise solution, being that you can build in preventative measures, you can build in recommendation systems, you can build in heat maps for vulnerabilities, where's the most dangerous parts of my organization, but really having an overview of the entire organization as opposed to just doing periodic audits.
And in an enterprise, are you selling to IT? Are you selling to line of business developers? Who's the first point of contact for you?
So a lot of times it's through the VP of engineering that we a lot of times get our entry. But there's, depending on the size of the company, you have vulnerability management. In some cases, you have internal audit. In other cases that are concerned, there are a couple different departments here that are concerned about open source usage. And what's the great value that we're bringing to the table here is we're breaking down those silos. We're allowing them to all see across the board how open source is used. Non-tech people and tech people alike can understand how open source is being used and what risks exactly are being taken and how they can prevent and improve their security and legal posture over time.
So 3 to 5 years from now, tell us a little bit more about what you envision the product doing for us, and does the buyer change at all over time?
I want Gitlinks to be synonymous with open source use at work, right? So I want us to be able to provide everything from recommendations to contributing more to the open source community, but in any way that an organization or enterprise wants to either use or contribute back to the open source community, Gitlinks should be the platform that brings it all under one umbrella. So that's where I see us playing in the total. So right now we're really focused on monitoring risk, but I feel like we can add so much more to development and innovation at an organization by really promoting the way that open source is used while mitigating risk.
And so to that point, it sort of sounds like even if you're getting in through maybe the VP of engineering in a smaller organization, this is fundamentally a risk and compliance-ish sale today. That group, I would say, compared to security, compared to app dev, has a smaller budget. It is a little more siloed. It is more about, hey, let's not get in trouble than like, let's help the business move faster. And I'm just curious, are there specific product elements or plans that you could put in place to touch, whether it's the security org or the dev org, in a deeper way? Because I could rattle off a whole bunch of things in security. Maybe you want to work with the pen testers so they file the bugs, or all the guys from Black Hat that are doing fuzzing on the code itself. How do you get out of sort of this defense audit mode, which is how you characterize some of the competition, into something that's a little bit more of an accelerant?
Right. And I will say that we are currently a solution that could potentially be part of a suite, right? And we need to be focused on building a suite of solutions, because enterprises focus on not buying 100 to 1,000 different vendors. They're looking at big solutions that solve big problems. So I agree in the fact that we may currently go into market be a little bit small and narrow focused, but I do understand the full perspective of where we need to be in order to be able to sell more efficiently into enterprises. I forgot the second part of your question, but if I got it, then that's good.
So maybe back to my budget question. What are you asking somebody for? How much are they spending? And if I spend X on Black Duck today, are you asking me to rip that out and replace it with what you're selling me? Or are you asking me to augment my spending on Black Duck with your stuff so that I sort of have licensure covered by them and have risk and vulnerability covered by you? How's that work?
So the beauty of the market is, again, there's only 10% of the market, or less than 10% of the market is penetrated today. That means most of the companies that I'm going into aren't using any solution at all. I'm not going head to head with a competitor and saying, rip them out, put us in place. However, could we? Yes. Could we provide that solution that a competitor is using or providing for them? Yes, we can. Fortunately, we don't have to go head to head very much these days. As far as what we're asking people to spend, this is an enterprise product, so we're not focused necessarily on startups or lower than companies that are less than 500 employees, but we're really focusing on the higher end so that we're adding benefit from the idea that you have a big organization and a lot of stuff's coming in and you're losing track of it. So therefore, we're pricing it as an enterprise product.
Great. All right. Ian, thank you very much.